Wars have been fought for centuries, mostly for land or freedom from oppression. They involve violence and bloodshed. Many innocent lives are ended through war. One man saw a different approach to liberation and freedom, though, a nonviolent alternative to war. During the 1930s, India was being controlled by Great Britain. The British had begun taxing the Indians for many goods and spices that were being exported to make money for Great Britain. The Indians were being oppressed, and living conditions were worsening for many people. Not only was Great Britain oppressing the lower class, but they were also forcing their Christian beliefs on the Muslim and Hindu populations. Eventually, the British ruled that taxes must be placed on the production and sales of salt. Indians were being forced to buy it from the British. The major problem with these salt acts was that the Indians, especially the lower class, used salt to preserve foods, and it was a key ingredient in many meals. But it was so expensive that they could no longer afford it. Something had to be done. One influential individual by the name of Mahatma Gandhi decided to rebel using a tactic other than war. Civil disobedience, or satyagraha, was a nonviolent means of resistance. Gandhi believed that violence can only beget more violence. In order to truly combat violence and oppression, one must respond with nonviolent resistance. The Indian word satyagraha can be broken down into two smaller words. In Sanskrit, satya means truth, and agraha means firmness. Together, it means a force of truth and love to combat darkness and violence. In participating in a nonviolent movement, one can find strength to stand up against evil. It is more than just passive resistance because the protesters stand firm in their beliefs, but they do not allow violence to be the force behind their methods. The truth will guide a person to be firm in his actions. As the Indian people, both rich and poor, were suffering the injustices of the Salt Acts, Gandhi saw an opportune time to implement his plan of nonviolent resistance. Salt was necessary for the Indian people, and Gandhi knew that Indians could obtain their own salt on the Arabian coast. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi and about 80 other people set out on foot to march to the sea for salt in the village of Dandi, about 240 miles away from the town of Sabarmati, where they started. Each day, they stayed in a different village and gained more followers to peacefully protest the taxes on salt. And finally, on April 6th, the protesters reached Dandi. Gandhi picked up a handful of mud with the precious mineral in it and boiled the water to produce salt, the good that the British government had outlawed. After Gandhi rebelled against the Salt Acts, he encouraged his fellow Indians to do the same. By the 1st of May, however, over 60,000 people had been imprisoned by the British. Eventually, on May 4th, 1930, Gandhi himself was arrested. In January of 1931, however, he was released and became leader of the Indian National Congress, a nationalist group that was fighting for liberation from Great Britain. Even though the Salt Acts were not outlawed immediately, this event was the first of many to lead India to independence in August of 1947. It was essentially a unifying force for the Indian people. Gandhi was recognized as a national leader and hero. Even though he was not a great military general, the British knew that he was still powerful because of his nonviolent methods. The Salt March and Gandhi's theory on satyagraha had a huge impact on many incredible leaders. Even though Gandhi was assassinated in 1948, his spirit and teachings lived on to influence others. Nelson Mandela and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. are just two examples of leaders who practiced Gandhi's theory on nonviolence. Both of them were successful in changing their nations for the better. Without the Salt March, though, Gandhi may not have had such a substantial impact on the world. This event was so important in changing the way that world conflicts can be resolved. It sparked the idea of a nonviolent alternative to war. The Salt March proved that a group of protesters can be just as powerful and influential as an army. The only difference is that satyagraha, or civil disobedience, does not wage people's lives like war does.